Hello everyone, welcome to the DotVVM Global Community Meetup. My name is Abdul and I handle community relations at DotVVM. We are very excited to have you for this meetup, and also we have like amazing line of speakers this time. So we have two speakers, one Thomas and second is Michael. So Thomas is author of DotVVM. So before we begin, let me just give you like a brief idea about this meetup. So we'll start by this introduction by myself, and then there will be talk from Thomas. And sorry, there will be, sorry, I think I missed the slide. I missed saving the slide. So there will be talks by Thomas, and then the next talk will be from Michael, and then after that there will be an open mic session. So if you have any thing, if you would like to present with the Thought VVM community, please get in touch with me. Then after the session, after Michael's session, so we can give you some time so we can present to our community. So let me just introduce you to my Thomas. So Thomas is author of .vvm, and Thomas is also a Microsoft most valuable MVP, and he has been .NET developer for like quite some time. So currently Thomas is CEO of Riganti, which is a startup based out of Czech Republic. So Riganti is basically into like custom software development, consulting, and solution architecture services. So without further ado, so I will give like controls to Thomas. Please start the session.
Okay, thank you. So I will start sharing the screen. Hopefully it will work. Okay, can you see the screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, amazing. Okay. So I will shortly share a few new features that we will be releasing very soon in .vvm 3.0, and I will also mention a few things we want to focus on after .vvm 3.0 release. And this week we will publish the public preview of .vvm 3.0, which is feature complete already. So it will be something like release candidate version. And if there are not any significant problems, then we will quite shortly release the final version of .vvm 3.0. So that's the plan. Maybe the release will be done today because we are just finishing up, but it depends on some other things. So maybe, but the release of the public preview should be available by the end of this week. So .vvm focuses on two things. First is building new web applications with a model view model approach. And the second scenario we are very fond of is the ability of modernizing old web forms applications with .vvm and migrating them to .NET Core, because it's possible to install .vvm into existing project, existing application, and start creating new pages in .vvm, or just rewriting old pages and replacing them with the new pages. And the application is still working and can be deployed at any time. So this is what we are also focusing on. But .vvm 3.0 primarily focuses on building new web apps, and it brings a lot of new features that you developers can take advantage of. So let's see what's new in .vvm 3.0, which will be released very shortly from now. So the first feature that is, I think that is most exciting is the thing that we are calling JS directive. We've been struggling with the names, and naming is, of course, the most difficult problem in a computer industry. So the final name of this feature is JS directive, because the first thing you need to do is to write @js at the beginning of the file, which basically allows you to add some JavaScript code that can interact with the things in your page. So it can interact with the components, it can trigger postbacks, it can read data from the view model, and so on. So it allows you to do interactions with .vvm stuff from JavaScript. And also you can call JavaScript code, JavaScript functions from your .vvm control. So you can create a button or that will invoke a JavaScript function, but it can take off all the advantages of .vvm, like the control styling and things like that, or maybe postback handlers and things like that. So there is a lot of use cases for this feature. You can make client-side changes to the view model. So if you have some requirements that that need to do a lot of things to your view model, but not communicating with the server, things that can be basically done offline to the view model. That's what you can do using this JS directive. You can, for example, call your custom APIs. DotVVM can call REST APIs, but if the API is too complicated or if it's using some different technology, maybe GraphQL or something like that, you can write a tiny piece of JS code that will get data from this custom API, and it can interact with the view model. So it can store these things in the view model. So you can use the rest of .vvm goodies to interact with this view model, but the data loading could be done by JavaScript. Also, if you want to use any kind of third-party library or component, then you will probably need to write few lines of JavaScript code, and we want to make it easy to just read data from the view model and also react to the events in this third-party control and do things with the view model. So you need two-way communication between the JavaScript part and between .vvm state and .vvm components. So the name JS directive is because of this. In order to start, you need to add this @js and name of the resource at the top of the page. So this JavaScript file will be loaded and it will be activated when this page appears on the screen. You can use this also in markup controls, and it will be scoped to just the markup control. So every markup control can have its own state, because if you use this control 5 times on the page, there will be actually 5 instances of this JavaScript module file. Yeah, so it's scoped to the current view, current page, current markup file which you are working on. So that's the first thing you can do. And this directive basically imports a JavaScript file in your page. And this JavaScript file, there is one requirement. This file must export a function. It must be a function, must be a default export of this module. And the function basically gets one argument called context, and it should return an object which defines methods that can be called from the page. So in the context, you can find things that you can call from JavaScript. Yeah, so basically in this context.named commands collection, there will be a list of all commands that are exposed from .vvm to the JavaScript. You can use this named command control that will do that. So you can define a command which name is my method, and there is a command or static command, and this name will be passed into this collection. So if you want to call something .vvm, some .vvm feature, some .vvm command, you can do it through context.named commands and name of the command. And if you want to expose JavaScript functions to be called from .vvm, so the opposite direction, you can just return an object that will contain this function, and you will be able to invoke it through _JS and invoke, and that's the name of the method. Yeah, so that's how this communication is done. And I have a demo, so let's look in the code. This is the correct page, and it's already running. So let's see this application, and you can see I have a Google Maps here. So this is the third-party thing. You need to write few lines of JavaScript code to make this map working, to make this map work. And I'm also using SignalR because, as you can see, these dots are moving slowly because I'm just connected to some SignalR hub, and the SignalR hub updates the positions of these dots in the map. So this is just some kind of real-time application, and you can interact with the things in the map. So, for example, what I can do, I can click on this dot, and it will turn red, and you can see this other part of the screen has changed, yeah, because now I have the chat with the courier number 3. Yeah? And if I'm doing some interactions here, so for example, if I click on 7, then another dot will be highlighted. Yeah, so this list and chat is made by just .vvm. These are just .vvm controls. This is a repeater, this is text box, this is button. But I can react, I can interact with the map from .vvm. And also if something happens in the map, so when I click on some marker, then some change is made in the view model, so this piece of the UI will be changed. Yeah, so that's how the interaction looks like. So let's see how it's done in the code. So the first thing is I have the default page. Okay, and there are a couple of things. The first is the map. So there is just an empty div element with some styles, and the contents of the map is populated by JavaScript. So that's the map part. And then I have two elements, first and second. The first is the list of couriers. So there is a repeater and link buttons inside. So every courier is just a link button. And it's visible when there is no courier selected. So if there is no one selected, I will see the list of couriers. So that's this piece. And if I select some courier, then this will disappear because the selected courier will not be null. And this will appear because elements which have non-null data context are displayed. If the data context is null, this element would be hidden. So that's where the chat appears. So I have the back button that will unselect the courier, and there's the name of the courier, text box, and the button. So that's the UI, and basically this switching is done by two things. First thing is that if you click on this link button, it will set the selected courier to the current object, or if you click on the map, it will do the same thing. So how it's done? But first, I have the JS directive in the page. So as you can see, I have add.js and dashboard module, and this resource needs to be registered. I will show it later how you register it. And then you can call functions in the JavaScript. So when I select a courier in the list, I can just say root.selected courier equals this. So this is just pure .vvm stuff. I'm just assigning a property in the view model some value. And then I need to tell the map, OK, please mark this courier in the red color, so it's highlighted. So I will call _JS invoke highlight courier, and I can pass parameters. So I will pass the ID of the courier. And there is, on the other hand, there is the on the other side, there is the JavaScript code which defines this function highlight courier, which will do the trick. So it will mark this courier in the red color, and of course unselects the other ones. And also, I need to be able to do this the same thing from the map. So there is a named command directive, named command control, which is called select courier, and there is also a command. And I'm saying, OK, this is a lambda, so I'm getting one parameter with the index of the courier. And I'm saying selected courier equals couriers and this index. Yeah, so if I click on the courier in the map, then the JavaScript will call this named command, which will assign the courier in the selected courier property. Yeah, so these are two ways how to change the selected couriers. One is done just natively from .vvm. The second is done by calling this named command from JavaScript. So let's see how the JavaScript file looks like. I have the dashboard module.js, and please ignore these highlights because ReSharper just don't know I'm using a newer version of JavaScript. But basically, what you need to do is to export a function. This export was not necessary, but you need to export a default function. So I'm exporting a default function that gets one parameter named context, and I'm just returning an object. So my object is basically a class, and it gets the context parameter in the constructor, and I will store it for later because I will need it. And now I can initialize the map. So basically, I'm calling some Google code, Google library, which is imported in the page 2, and I'm just looking for the map element in the page, and I will initialize the map with some coordinates and some zoom level. Then I need to initialize the SignalR connection because I will listen to the changes of positions of the couriers. So it's quite easy because I'm connecting using the native SignalR library in JavaScript, and I'm listening to some messages I will be getting, and then I'm just call my event handlers. And basically that's it. I can interact with the view model. One thing I can do the classic way, so .vvm view models root view model and set something. Now we have other API, but I cannot use it in this branch because it's not merged in the main yet. But you will see it later. There is the patch state function, so it should be available, and it will be a little bit easier. But that's how I notify the view model that I'm connected. This is just a Boolean property in the view model. If I get new positions of the couriers, I will just update or create the markers on the map and move them to the right coordinates. So nothing really special here. This is not related to .vvm much. There is just one thing. If somebody clicks on the marker, I will call the named command in the page, and I will pass the index of the courier. Yeah, so basically what I can do is, if you click on a marker in the page, I will just execute the named command called select courier, and I can pass any number of parameters. So now I'm passing this index. And then I'm calling a highlight courier function, which is also exported because it's just a public function in this object returned by the function. So I can call it from .vvm2, and basically I'm just going through all the markers, and if ID is equal to the correct index, I will use red icon. Otherwise, I'm using black icon. That's it. And there is a special method you can define that is called $dispose. All names starting with dollar are reserved for .vvm use, so please don't declare your own functions that start with $sign in these modules. And I will be stopping the SignalR connection. So because this application is actually a single page application, so when I go away from this page, I want to stop listening to the SignalR messages. Otherwise, I would probably get some errors in the dev console. Yeah. So if you declare any functions in this exported object, then you will be able to call _JS invoke highlight courier, and you can pass parameters in these functions. Yeah, so either the ID of the courier or just null, because nobody is selected right now. And if you want to call named commands in the page, you can use this context named commands, name of the command, and you can pass any parameters. There is no type checking because right now we are in JavaScript, so you need to make sure that you are passing a correct number of parameters and that the parameters have correct types. Yeah, this named command gets one parameter of type integer, so make sure that the value you are passing there actually can be used as can be converted to integer. Yeah. So that's how it works. We also, this is just pure JS. So this feature won't work in Internet Explorer 11 because it's using the new syntax of import-export modules, which is present from ECMAScript 6. And IE 11 doesn't support this syntax. In .vvm 3.0, the framework itself should support IE 11. We are just fixing a few issues right now because there are some problems with IE, but we should support it. But this specific feature won't be supported by IE 11 because these modules are not supported by this ancient browser. If you want to declare, or if you want to use some other advanced things in the modules, then you can probably you will probably want to use TypeScript. So if the module code is longer, then the type checking in TypeScript can be very useful. So I have the same demo here in TypeScript, and basically also this class doesn't need to be exported, because I'm just exporting the function. And here you can see that the code is the same, but there are type annotations. So you have these types here, and there is also a type module context, so you can see what's actually present in this type. And otherwise, the rest is the same. However, typically you will want to bundle all the dependencies into one script. So for example, I'm importing signal R here, and I'm using a module bundler called rollup. And this is the configuration of the rollup. So if you want to embed the signal R into this module, you can do it. And you can do it like this using rollup. So as an input, there is the dashboard module TS, and we are using the resolve and common.js, which just loads these module codes from node modules, and it will bundle everything together. You can minification, compression, and things like that. So that's what you can use. The most important thing is that the output format of the module needs to be ES, so ECMAScript modules. If you look at the generated file, it's a little bit crazy because there is the code of the signal R embedded here. But if you look at the end of the file, there is just export default and name of and this is just the function. Yeah. So that's what's needed. You need to use this export keyword, otherwise the module won't be loaded correctly. There is also demo of the Webpack, but right now it doesn't work because Webpack cannot produce these native ES6 modules. Yeah, so maybe we will support that in the next version of .vvm, but right now in .vvm 3.0, this won't work. Also, there's one other point. If you don't like the class syntax in JavaScript because it's a little bit weird, it doesn't fit in the language. Nobody is forcing you to use the classes. You can just return any kind of object, and it doesn't need to be class. I'm using class because it's quite convenient to persist state here. Yeah, so I have this markers array, which I need to access here in the constructor and in all these methods. So that's where the class helps me. You shouldn't have any state here, like declaring variable outside of this class, because if you will use this module in the single page app, the module is loaded just once. So all the state will be basically shared. It will be basically static. Yeah, shared between multiple pages in the single page app. Or if you use this module in markup controls, yeah, you can have multiple instances, but if something is declared outside of this instance, then it will be shared by every instance, yeah, because it's basically static. The modules behave like singleton objects. Yeah, so that's why I'm using class, because it's very easy to work with state. Just assign it to this, and you will see it anywhere here in the class. Yeah, you have the state available every time. Okay, so these are the JS directives. So this can be helpful if you need to interact with some other advanced JavaScript components or JavaScript piece of code. Then we have other change in the framework, which is more visible if you want to extend the framework, if you want to also work with the framework from JavaScript. If you are just using .vvm views and view models and you avoid writing JavaScript at all, you may not meet this feature, but it's also very important for us because it helps you to work with the view model in a type-safe manner. Until now, the view model was just a bunch of knockout observable objects, and if there was some property of type integer, then nobody was actually checking if you have integer in the view model on the client side. On the server side, it's easy because you have C#, you have .NET, so there is type safety, but on the client side, there wasn't. Until you start writing your own JavaScript that interact with the view model, it's not such a big deal, but when you start to work with the view model, it can be quite unsafe and you can easily break things in the view model. So that's why we rewritten the state management in .vvm practically completely. And there are two new concepts you can use. There is first thing is that the state of the view model is persisted as a single JavaScript object, and it's not knockout observables. It's just a plain JS object. There are still the observables, but there are wrappers around this state object, so they are not storing their values. They are actually just returning values from this state. And the state is immutable, so basically it's a snapshot of the view model at the moment where you accessed it. So there is the .vvm.state property, which is just readable, and you can get the current snapshot of the state. And there is also a method called patch state, which you can use to update the state of the view model. In ideal case, you should be using this method instead of assigning to the observables, but also assigning to the observables work, and is used heavily from the controls. And if you assign something in the observable, the change will get to this immutable state immediately, but all the other observables will be notified a little bit later, which should improve client-side performance because the UI should not be so laggy. Yeah, it's basically a re-implementation of the knockout feature called deferred updates. We have our own implementation, but it really helps if you are doing a lot of changes in the view model at the same time, so it will be notified only once. And there are, as I said, there are knockout observables, but they are just a facade around the immutable state object. And if you assign anything to the view model, it's validated. So if the value is not exactly of the correct type, there can be two things that can happen. If there is some automated conversion possible, then it will be converted and you should get a warning in the console. I'm not sure if in the current version it's there, but in the final version it should be there. Yeah, so if there is some coercion of the value, you should get a warning in the console. And if it cannot be converted, if it's just a different type and DotVVM doesn't know how to deal with that, you will get a JavaScript error. So you will see if you are working with the view model in a correct manner, and you should be able to fix your code. And it should be much more safe, so it could prevent from breaking things up if there's something in the view model which is not valid. So let's see the demo. I have a very simple demo here. It's just one of the samples we have for testing the framework itself, and I can show you some JavaScript API. So if you call .vvm.state, you will get a plain JavaScript object without any observables. Yeah, so you can just debug it very easily because you can see what's in the view model. And you can notice that we have this $ type everywhere. And this is the identifier of the specific type. So .vvm is using this property to track of which type the object is. So that's what DotVVM is using to detect the correct type. And there is a new function called .vvm.patchState, and you can use this function and you can modify some properties of the view model. So this is my state, and there is the total property of type number. So I can send any other number to this property, and you can see it was reflected in the user interface. So I sent there 1, 2, 3, and we, as I said, we support some coercions. So if you put this value as a string and it can be converted to a number, then you will just it will just be converted. And right now it doesn't tell me that the coercion happened, but it should. So in the final version, we will add a warning here because there is some type coercion that had to be made in order to make sure that the view model is really valid. If you try to, if I read it, you can see it's not returning string, it's returning a number. So you can see the conversion actually happened. If I would try to assign some different value that cannot be interpreted as a number, I should get an error. So you can see there is an error. There is also a path. So if you are working with some more complex objects, you should be able to see what exactly happened. And of course, it should work also if you try to assign some object. Also, there should be an error. It's quite strict. We support only few automatic conversions, so it should be pretty safe. Some conversions need to be supported because some HTML controls, even if you, for example, use input type equals number, so you can enter numbers there, but the control will still use strings when you use value binding on it. So that's why we have the coercion. So we will be sure that in the view model, it's always number. You can also work with complex things. If you look in the state, there is invoice lines, for example, which is an array of objects. So there is one object, one line on the invoice, and I can just pass some other, I can use this patch state to add item in the array. So I'm patching the array, and you can see the first is empty object, but this is the patch, so it will just keep the first line as is, and I can use this, and I can just add a second line on the invoice. Yeah, so you can see it's there. And also, if I do some mistake in the types, for example, when I try to set, I don't know, null into the quantity, then I should get an error because it has to be a number. The null value is not allowed here. Yeah, so that's what we can do with this type safe view model. It should be much safer, and you will see if you try to assign something in the view model from the JS directive from your own JavaScript code, you will see that this validation takes place, and you will be notified if you are doing something wrong. The next feature we have been working on is to support lambda expressions in data bindings, which also allowed us to support LINQ, some LINQ functions in the data binding. So right now we don't have type inference, so you need to write the name of the type before the parameters. But I guess it's already a work in progress, and we plan to get rid of this in the next version. So you will be able to just write customers.where C arrow and the code. And right now we are adding some other LINQ functions that may be useful if you, for example, want to do a client-side filtering or something like that. So some of these functions will be present. There's one thing that should be emphasized. Since we are just translating C# expressions to JavaScript equivalence or not exactly equivalence to a similar functions in the JavaScript, they may behave differently in some edge cases. We are trying to make it work as closely to their C# equivalence as possible, but still there will be some changes. For example, one of our colleagues is just implementing the order by, and it's very difficult to make it work exactly in the same way as it works in the C#. So please do not expect that this will be 100% on par with the C# functionality. However, in most cases, in the common cases, it will work and it will offer you to do some things in the view model without actually calling the server. So I think it can be useful. And I have also a short demo for that. It's just another sample, and from it you can see my nice graphics skills. If I look in the Visual Studio here, here is how this page looks like. So there is the text box, which you can use to set the filter. And there is a list of categories. Please ignore these squiggles. The current version of .vvm extension doesn't work well with the lambda expression. It doesn't know them. So that's why this is underscored, but the code will work. And basically, I have a list of all categories which are available, and I will display just the categories that are satisfied by the filter of the customers. And so if I filter only customers which have the red category, so I will see just the red category here. Yeah, so I'm just filtering customers and give me just customers. Either there is no filter, so I want all customers, or the name of the customer contains the filter expression. And also, and the category is present here, and there has to be at least one customer of that category, so this category will appear in my repeater. Yeah, and so that's how I'm rendering the checkboxes. And there is also the grid view, and I'm filtering the customers just by name. So either the name is not specified, then I want to always return true because I want to see all the customers, or there is some name specified, so I can just display the filtered customers. And there is no button because immediately when you change the value, the filtering will take place. So for example, if I filter just the Alice and press tab, you can see there is just one record because no other contains this substring. And also the categories were filtered because there is only the red category in this list. Yeah. And if I, for example, filter RO, so it returns 2 records, and you can see these are 2 categories. And there is no communication with the server. If you look in the network tab and let's do this. If you look in the network tab, so this is right now the page is loaded, and now this works just on the client side, no communication with the server, so it should also be very fast. Yeah. So that's what we are playing with, and we plan to support more LINQ functions. I think that the syntax will be much nicer when we will have the type inference implemented, because then you will be able to just say all categories.where cat and the arrow, and yeah, because this is not very nice, but still it's better than nothing. Yeah, so that's what you can you will be able to use in .vvm 3.0, and I hope that we will have some time to fix this in the Visual Studio extension, because right now it doesn't know this arrow operator. So that's why this is underscored, and also the highlighting here is quite broken because of that. Okay, so there are some other tiny, or sometimes they are not so tiny, but there are other improvements. So we rewrote completely the entire client-side part of .vvm. We were rewriting it to a modern TypeScript, refactored it, so it has much more files. It's not everything in one big .vvm.ts file like it was. And we have done a lot of refactoring, review, and bug fixes that we found out. And we are using ECMAScript 6 modules. So we are using rollup for bundling this into one JavaScript file. And we are using also some polyfills for IE11 because we still want to support IE11 because some of our customers are still dependent on this old browser. We have done a lot of refactoring in the postback pipeline. We fixed a lot of concurrency issues we had there. There are some new events in .vvm.events on the client side, and these events should provide more information about what happened, especially the error state events will contain the entire response, so you can read additional information from the server and to be able to determine more information about the error itself. So that's other things. And there's a lot of other improvements, stability, performance fixes. We've been working for more than a year on this new release. So if you want to try it, wait until the end of this week. You should be able to find the .vvm free preview because we are right now working on publishing it. So I hope that it will be tomorrow or over the weekend. And if you want to try the sample on JS directives, you can see it here in this repo. I will just fix few issues and commit it there. And there is the .vvm is there using a submodule. So make sure that you call a git submodule in it and git submodule update, so it will work. Yeah. So, and what are the plans for the next versions of .vvm? Right now, there is in progress pull request for type inference in lambda expressions. So I hope that we will have this soon. Also, we plan to support more translations of C# to JavaScript. So you will be able to use more functions in value bindings, for example. Also, we are planning to extend grid view dataset to make it more extensible. Basically, you will be able to compose your own grid view dataset from various parts. So if you, for example, want different kind of paging than just the page number 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. For example, if you are communicating with some APIs, there is no notion of page numbers. For example, there can be some continuation tokens. So we want to make sure this is extensible. So if you need to track any other metadata for paging, you will be able to do so. And the same thing applies to sorting. You will be able to have multi-criteria sorting and things like that. And also we are planning to have more loading providers, because right now you can load your grid view dataset using the classic command with postback, but there should be other ways of loading data in the grid view dataset, maybe the REST API, maybe OData, or just using static commands, which are much faster than classic commands. And also we have done some work on making it easier to write custom components in .vvm. So I expect that the next release will focus also on extensibility and writing custom controls, because in a lot of cases right now it's quite complicated to build your own controls. So we definitely want to simplify that. So that's everything. There are some normal links. I will post the links to the samples in the chat, and also I will publish these slides. So if you want to see anything, so if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer.
Thank you, Thomas. So that was really insightful, and I also can't wait to try the version 3. So if anyone have any questions, feel free to ask now. And also if you are a bit hesitant with basically with your audio, then you can also put your question in the chat box here or in the WhatsApp group. So once I get access, then I will ask on behalf of you. Our if no one has questions, then I think we can move to the next.
I think somebody had question. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I just the question about TypeScript. I very like the new feature of JS directive as you show us. Will be and if I can write, I would like write components with TypeScript, and will be .vvm modules available on TypeScript definition website?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. We have been experimenting with publishing type definitions on the NPM. Right now we have some test package because we are not sure. We wanted to try it on some projects first, but I can give you the package so you can try it and give us some feedback. It would be very helpful for us. And also we are planning to publish the entire .vvm code base, the TypeScript part of .vvm on npm, because if you want to write something more sophisticated, you would probably want to bundle .vvm and your code together in one large file. Yeah, because that would allow you to consume not only public API of .vvm, but also some our internal functions. So that's I will be happy to provide you the test package for npm we have, so you can try it and give us feedback if this works for your case.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
And may I have another question?
Yeah, of course.
I also like the new feature about lambda expressions, and as I understand, they are translated to JavaScript.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it would not be easy to implement something like custom functions if when I have a complex expression for evaluate, maybe it would be easy write it as a function and refer it in code, then just write in the code as you show.
Yeah, I think that there are a couple of options. That's one thing where I think that the JS modules can really help, because when let me share the screen for a minute again. I really don't like these long expressions. I think that it just poisons the view with a lot of code that probably shouldn't be there. So what I think that would be better is just to be able to call a JS, to put this in the JS module and just call it from the UI. So that's one thing. Other thing, if you have some more complex C# function that you want to be able to use in the data bindings, what you can do is to register a custom translation. So there is something like JavaScript translatable method collection, maybe. Yeah. Here we have, and this is the code base of .vvm. There is registration of method translations for example, if you want to register a translation for string format, you can do it like this. So you register this method translator and it's defined here. You can just compose a JavaScript expression tree. So basically you're saying translate string format to .vvm.globalize.format and pass the first parameter and some array of the other arguments. Yeah, for example. So if you have some other methods you want to use in the commands, you can just in the .vvm startup, you can just register your own custom translation. So this may also help if you want to translate some C# functionality to JavaScript. But I think that that both options are possible, and I think that in order to get rid of these long expressions, I will prefer to move them in the JS modules.
Yeah.
And what we have also been thinking about is to generate TypeScript definitions for the types that are being used in the view model. We have always dreamed of this, but never had much time to do it. But since C# or since Roslyn now supports the source generators feature, I think that it should be quite easy to generate TypeScript definitions for the types that you are using in the view model. So that's probably one of the things we will focus on also in the next release.
Thank you.
Any more questions, Martin?
Maybe just will be there breaking changes in the new release?
Yeah, there will be some breaking changes, but we sincerely hope that there will be less breaking changes than between version 1 and version 2. And I think that I'm not aware of any significant large breaking change that would affect everyone. Of course, there are some differences, and the more you are writing your own JavaScript, I think the more you will be hitting on these breaking changes, because we have added new events. We have a little bit changed some arguments of some events. So if you are hooking on, for example, before postback or after postback, there will probably be some changes, or maybe the order of these events will be a little bit different because we have been fixing some bugs in that. But I don't expect many changes, and we will publish together with .vvm 3.0. We will publish a release notes on GitHub. So if you go through the release notes, you should see what you will probably need to change. And right now there is not many issues we are aware of. Of course, we may have introduced some breaking changes and don't know about it at all. But from what I know, there are not many breaking changes. And we have been using .vvm 3.0 on our internal projects for quite a long time, and we didn't hear many complaints. So I think it will be better than the transition from 1.1 to 2.0.
Thank you. That's all.
Awesome.
Okay.
All
right. Thank you. Thank you, Thomas, for your session. It was really insightful. So we will now move on to the next session. So next session is from Michael. So Michael is .NET developer, and he has been working with .vvm controls, both Bootstrap and Business Pack. Michael has been contributing to .vvm since its alpha release. So over to you, Michael.
Hello, everyone. So, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Nice. So today I will show you the newest addition to .vvm add-ons. This one is .vvm. It tries to solve the problem with you having multiple types of pages which would deserve two separate technologies. So your classical page will have, your classical application will have some simple presentation pages which are mostly static and does not need the added weight of complex framework. And on the other hand, you will have the complex business pages, the pages with large grids, the dynamic pages where you want your complex framework to help you with development and to speed up the development. For the simple pages, you kind of want to avoid the fat frameworks because you want your landing pages, your contact pages, etc. to be really fast. So if you would be willing to deal with two separate technologies, you may choose to have .vvm for your large complex pages and some other lightweight technology for the presentation one. But nobody really wants to maintain two different technologies, two different environments even maybe. So you would try to write everything in a single technology. But that has many disadvantages from the SEO head and so on. So first, let us choose the technology for your simple pages if you would want to write it in two separate technologies. I would advise you to try the AMP, which was formerly known as Google Accelerated Mobile Pages. The AMP is all about speed. The normal load times for AMP pages is far under 1 second, which is more than 4 times faster than normal pages. And in some cases, when you are using the whole infrastructure for AMP, the page load is instant. As soon as you decide to click on the link, which will take you to the page is loaded. Although the AMP was originally developed by Google, the entire technology is now open source and it's maintained by AMP working group. So there should be no need to fear about Google deciding to kill it but Google will maybe like reward you for using AMP with some greater SEO scores because the speed is really great when using AMP technology. The great speed doesn't come for free. There are many restrictions with AMP. For example, there is no way how to include custom JavaScript with single exception, and that is the AMP script, which allows you to use the custom JavaScript in some background workers, but there is no way how you can use your classical on-page JavaScript in AMP pages. So there is no way how to use your standard large JavaScript libraries. But AMP has its own set of components which can replace your classical carousels, your classical slideshows and such. So it's still usable for the normal landing pages. Other disadvantage of using AMP is that you need to fit all your CSS into single inline element, and it has to be under 75 kilobytes. So there is no way how you could fit some large front-end framework like, for example, Bootstrap on AMP page. Other big disadvantage is that you cannot use the important directive in CSS. All these restrictions have one main point. They try to forbid you from creating page with dynamically changing layout. This is due to AMP trying to calculate the first part of the page you will see when you come to the page. And the AMP does this because he tries to render everything before you go to the page, so the perceived load time is instant then. Okay, the AMP has two main parts. There is the AMP framework, which is the language which you use to write the AMP pages. It's some mutation of classical HTML, which is used then. And there is also the AMP distribution infrastructure. So in order for your page to appear in Google search results and Bing results, etc., your page needs to be valid. Then it gets passed into the AMP cache, which does some additional optimizations. And then the AMP viewer, which is the part in the browser, it's just classical web application. It will load your page and display it to the user. AMP also works without all this infrastructure stuff, but you won't get the instant load without it. So if we choose to use AMP, now we may be stuck with the two technologies, and maintaining two sets of pages is not fun because we may not want to use AMP for all our users. If you are on desktop with powerful machine and great internet connection, there is no need for using those restricted pages. You may as well use the full-fledged .vvm site then. But if you are on a mobile device, you may want to use the AMP page. So that's the reason why .vvm AMP was created. It allows you to do automatic conversion of your .vvm pages to their AMP version. When you choose to do the conversion, your original page will still exist, but there is now on separate path the AMP version of this page, and those two pages are linked, so browsers and other bots can notice that this page has its AMP version. The registration of your AMP pages is really simple. Only thing you need to do is in your route table to specify, okay, I want for this page to have its AMP version. I will show you later how this is done. Unfortunately, there is still some restrictions when using .vvm AMP because the underlying technology is still AMP, and so we need to generate valid AMP HTML. Then we have to deal with the restrictions. So that means that there is no way how you could use all the fancy .vvm3 JS modules, unfortunately, because there is the external JS is not allowed. Also, there is no way how we can do the full postback or any postback back to server and pass the information back. Only way how to modify the content on your page is to do the GET request on the server, generate new page, and display new version to the user. Okay, we still also need to fit under those 75 kilobytes of CSS. There is some ways how we can go over it. For example, the animation code is not included in those 75 kilobytes. We can put the animations in other element and it won't count. We are also doing some quite aggressive optimizations of your CSS code and inlining, merging all your external CSS resources and other resources you may have on your page. But okay, not all landing pages and simple pages are so easy that they could be transferred to AMP without any modifications. On the other hand, we don't want you to be forced to dummify your full-fledged .vvm page just to be able to create the AMP version of it. Due to this, there are some elements which allow you to select which parts of the page will be present only on the .vvm version and which parts will be present only on the AMP version. There are also some configuration which can be made, which allows you to modify the default behavior of .vvm AMP finding element which is not valid. It can throw an exception, which is the default behavior, and the recommended one because you want to know that something is not correct on your page. But if you are adventurous enough, you can use the log and ignore setting, which will just log that there is some invalid element and skip it and render the rest of the page as best as it can. Okay. I will show you the demo of converting a really simple .vvm page into AMP. I have 3 simple pages. On the first one, you have just some graphics, some text which was composed on the server, some HTML which also came from the server, and then repeater with 3 simple items. Nothing complex, it's really simple. On the other page, we have something really complicated which we would not be able to do in AMP. We have this button which goes back in time with us, and we don't want to allow AMP users to use this functionality. So we would, on the AMP version, just ensure that this whole section is not present, and we will display something different to AMP users. And our last page is something really complex, which we want all our users to be able to do, but it contains postbacks. So the AMP version is not possible for this page, and we will leave this page intact without the AMP version. So let's try the conversion now. When we go to code, the first thing we need to do is to install the NuGet package with .vvm. It's present on the NuGet. You should be able to find it without any issues. After installation, we want to add .vvm in the startup. This is done in 3 steps. First, we want to configure all the necessary services with add.vvm support method. Then we want to configure the .vvm to use AMP with add.vvm on the .vvm configuration. And now the only remaining step is to select which routes we would like to convert to AMP and which not. This is done via modification to the route table. We just select the rows we want, so the simple page route and the complex element page, and use add with AMP instead of the classical route registrations. The only thing we need to change is to provide the .vvm configuration to the route registration. And we will do the same for the other page. So now we have chosen the 2 pages to include the AMP version, and we did not modify the complex page at all. So this one will have only the .vvm version. Now if we try to run the application, we should get our classical .vvm page on the default URL, but we can see that the AMP validator extension now points to the AMP page. And if you access the page, there is no difference. Yeah, the pages look the same. There is no change in behavior. The only difference is the URL, which now contains the AMP prefix for our page. If we try to go to our more complex page, the time machine one, we will encounter a 500 error. This is .vvm telling us that the button is not supported in AMP version. So we maybe would like to comment it out to ensure that our AMP users would not be able to access this feature. So if we go to our complex element page, we have our button here, and we just need to do the AMP exclude and wrap our button in this construct. We would like to display normally the AMP users some alternative content, and we can do that with AMP include element. So something like, sorry,
You have AMP image instead of AMP include.
Hello. So now this part of the page will be included only for normal .vvm users, and this part of the page will be included only for the AMP users. There is
AMP
also
image,
other way how to do the
include.
exclude, and that is the AMP exclude attribute, which is a little bit lower impact on the page, but I prefer to use the full-fledged wrapping of the element. Now if we access the page, AMP image, it's AMP include. The IntelliSense is too helpful sometimes. Then on the classical page, we will get the full-fledged site, and on the AMP version, we get the alternative content. If we don't want to modify everything in our page to be valid, we can try to run the page without the exceptions enabled. This can be done in the .vvm startup. In the add.vvm support method, it has overload with the configuration, and here you can change the behavior of .vvm AMP. For example, you have your error handling modes, where you can set how the AMP will behave when it finds some invalid HTML tag or invalid knockout binding, and so on. So we will set that on invalid HTML tags, we want just to log it and ignore. If you want to extend .vvm, you can do it with custom transformations. I will talk about those a little bit later, but here you can just register your custom rules of transforming original page to the AMP version. Let's not do it now, but let's try the version with log and ignore. So on our complex element page, we still have the button for all users, and let's see what happens when we access the page. Beforehand, we would got the 500 error, and now everything seems to be working on the normal page, which is expected. And on the AMP version, the invalid button just disappeared. And in the console, we have this error present. Okay. The last thing I would like to show you in this demo is how the routing works. If you remember, we have this one page which is not AMP page, which does not have the AMP variation. When I go from page to page in normal version, I'm still on the normal non-AMP page. But if I switch to .vvm AMP versions, now all the routing links to pages with AMP version will transfer me to their respective AMP versions. So I'm still on the AMP when I go from page to page. But if I go to complex page which does not have the AMP version, I will get to the normal page, and the user will not notice any change, only slight increase in load times, but it should be negligible. Okay, I would like to go quickly how this thing even works. First, even normal pages are built of controls of your normal HTML elements and .vvm controls, which in some point of life cycle will get built into one huge tree of components. This is the point when .vvm AMP comes in, and it will do those transformations I showed you earlier, and it will replace the controls which are invalid, such as some images and so on, with their AMP counterparts. Or the transformations can just modify some setting of .vvm control. Defaultly, this is used to set the render mode for all controls to server side, because we don't have any JavaScript on our clients, so we need to render entire application on the server. Other thing that transformations often do is validation that the control isn't set in a way which is not allowed in AMP. For our next step, we tackle the CSS size limit and single CSS inline element rule by taking all the CSS resources we have required on our page and compiling them in a single one big inline resource, which then gets parsed, validated for forbidden important rules, and optimized, and then also minified. After all those steps and some other small bits and bobs, we just render our whole HTML and send it to the client. And that's it. There is no hidden magic there. It should work for all your simple landing pages and others without any major modifications needed on your page. So just to recapitulate, why would you want to use it is to speed up your landing pages and non-complex pages, which will benefit you in sales scores and user satisfaction probably. And to do so, you just need to install .vvm NuGet package and do the 3 steps in .vvm startup. So add .vvm support on service collection, add .vvm on .vvm configuration, and then select which routes should use AMP and which doesn't need to do so. After all those steps, you should go over the pages you have chosen to be generated with AMP version and check if everything is okay. For first pass, I would suggest to do it with the error throwing configuration, so you are notified about every exception which occurs. You can fix it afterwards with the AMP include, AMP exclude, and it should work without any problems. And then it's just profit. Hopefully Google notice your AMP version as soon as possible, and you will get a lot of traffic for your AMP versions. So thank you. Does anybody have any questions? The repo is available on this URL, so you should be able to access the sample and the presentation there.
All right, looks like we will have to end the session here. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Michael. It's been great having you here, and hopefully see you in next month's meetup. And for next month meetup, we are planning to explore Zoom, and we will let you know the new steps for joining the meetup. So till then, bye bye. Take care.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.